very lucky to hear these read. Our next reader is Christine Schutt. She is the author of, is this working? Yeah? Yes. She is the author of 2 story collections and 3 novels. Her most recent novel is Prosperous Friends. She was a National Book Award finalist for her first novel, Florida, and a Pulitzer Prize finalist for her second novel, All Souls. She has twice won the O. Henry Prize for short stories. She lives and teaches in New York. Thank you. It's very nice to be here again. The Center for Fiction. Thank you, Noreen. Thank you, all the staff, and thank you, Diane, for making this beautiful magazine. It's wonderful to be reading with all these folks and hearing their great fiction. I'm going to be reading an excerpt from a novel in progress. It's called Pure Hollywood. How disappointing it was to wake intact and far away from the matchstick aftermath of the extinguished fires, thready smoke rising from piles that were homes, the famous modern house, not among them. Mimi, he asked quietly, driving up a slight incline and into a space, still hers, everything, all of it, a modern house shaped like slung plates, no corners, different heights. What do they think this place is worth, he asked, still whispering, so as not to disturb. What? There was only the house. What's it worth? It's like living in a great fucking painting is what it is. The place is priceless. The house was not that much cooler than the car, and Mimi went through the house and opened windows and the sliding door to the patio. I know I'm letting in hot air, she said, but claustrophobic. I hate things shut. She moved off to the kitchen and offered Stetson a drink. What are you doing? He asked, even as he found and filled 2 glasses with ice. I'm taking off my clothes, she said. They smell of smoke. I should go ahead and burn them. Off came her shell and the wavy pants that shivered down the chair rail fast as she threw them. Underneath, she wore what looked like string. There wasn't much to her. Fuck, Stetson said. His shirt was off his pants, his shoes. He sniffed his arm. My arm stinks. He put his arm up to his sister's nose. What is that? Pickles, she offered. What did you have for lunch? He sniffed his other arm. Nothing. All the pleasure to be had in looking at Stetson, but Mimi had married Arnold Fine, ugly as an anvil. Arnie. Arnie was dead. Less than a month ago, her husband stepped into the pool and died, aged 58, heart attack. He was ashes in a matter of minutes. What happened after Arnie had died happened fast. The ambulance, the body bag, the funeral home, the furnace. Mimi poured vodka into her glass. Tonic, she pointed to the counter, and there's Perrier. Tap was okay with Stetson, but did she have any food? How can you be hungry? Smell your arms, she said. Barely dressed, wearing pointy mules, Mimi walked onto the terrace to a Hockney scene, only not so blue, more green. The lounge chairs were rightly low and wide, hewn from wood that would outlast them. But the pool was a swamp-tinted squiggle, decorative. Stetson had never seen anyone swim in it, and bobbing in the water didn't count. 2 million? 4 million? This is like old times, Mimi said, bobbing in the water to her waist. You're tempting me, he said. Then, the terrace is small, maybe 1.5? Old times. That's new. She adjusted her strings, distracted by leaves sounding wooden in the wind. If only the wind weren't so hot. How do you insure a priceless place? Stetson asked. You don't. She took up her glass and banged the cubes against her teeth, chewed ice. For a time she stared at the pool, then stood, shivered, went back to the house to fix herself another drink. Is there someone here? Stetson asked when she returned. The gardener? A gardener came with the house, a man not so new as ignored. The gardener had a leaf blower. The plants weren't a problem, but the grotesque tree shed. Brown leaves, long as shoes, got shoved around the walkways until the nameless gardener came to blow them out of sight. But where? They seemed to disappear, just as the gardener disappeared, week to week. Sometimes Mimi heard the hacking cough of his truck, sometimes his blower. Today she had heard nothing. There was nothing much to blow away, nothing dead in the pool, but the slack hose jumped, distended, and withdrew around the house, followed by the sound of water. It had to be the gardener. Mimi went to see, and yes, it was the gardener, misting the front of the house. He had nodded at her. What was wrong with him? Didn't he read the papers? Someone, not Mimi, not today, would have to tell him there was no more work here. She walked back to Stetson, enjoying the ka-tack of her shoes against the stone terrace, a sound both slutty and indulged, right out of the movies. But wasn't Mimi right out of the movies? She was pretty enough, everyone said. Does this really feel like home to you, he asked. Yes, she said, and she adjusted the chair to lie flat, eyes closed, given over to the liquidy heat lapping her pale body. We weren't married long enough for anyone to believe I loved Arnie, she said, but I did. He made me laugh, honestly. There's a marriage measured in months. Aren't you hot? She sat up, wiped her eyes, and walked into the pool. Come in with me. The water's cold, but you get used to it. If his sister was thin, he was thin too, jailbird sickly with his arms held up as he waded deeper, testing. The pool was not very deep, which might explain the slightly yellow color of the water, and the sky, too, was a creepy kind of yellow, a spreading dread. Do you think... She began and didn't finish. She said, the gardener's hosing down the house. When's the last time this pool was cleaned? Stetson treaded the water and looked around him. Just the color, he said, which along with slimy tiles was sickening, and he did his swimming such as it was in the middle. He dove under, he made a few strokes, down and back. Only the tiles along the ledge of the pool seemed unclean, and he avoided the ledge until the last minute when he lifted himself out. Hey, she said, where are you going? Inside. In the kitchen, he drank from the faucet, then filled a glass and drank enough to fill it again before he set it on the counter. His medicine made him thirsty. Mimi came up from behind him and he flinched at her touch. Water splattered against the windows. The gardener was close. You don't get it. I do, she said. You're sober, and I'm not. He said, that's right. Then he took up his glass and walked down the hall into the bathroom where a clunking noise signaled his intention to shower. From the looks of the soap, discolored, cracked, no one had used the downstairs shower for some time. Tepid, rust-colored water pooled at his corpsey feet. He'd been out of the sun. The clunk of the pipes when he turned off the water echoed, sounding spooky. He couldn't do much with a hand towel, and his long hair dripped onto his collar and down the back of his white shirt. At least he felt cool, at least dressing, and the hotter prospects of the hours to come didn't dismay him. But his sister, just getting past her, was hard. Mimi stood almost as he'd left her, knobby in a way that made her look naked. She was listening to nothing he could hear, but her expression suggested the sound grated. What is it? You don't hear that noise? Not the pipes. There it is again. All he heard was the high-pitched present. Stay, she said. I can't, he said. Her eyes stung from smoke or crying both, and she drew the drapes and turned on a downstairs light to soothe them, a small flame in the gloom of the mostly bare and sunken living room. The Ames chair, her husband's, startled her. Where had it been that she had not seen it? Then her lawyer, good on his word, called, and she learned what she already knew. Nothing was hers. Briefly sober, she called Stetson to say she wasn't going to drink anymore and she wished he would come back. She didn't like to be alone in the house. Call me, she said, then blipped off, but he hadn't even answered this call with her name on it. She doubted he would answer her message, so she fixed herself more of the same and lowered the blinds in the kitchen and in the living room to spy on the gardener as he moved around the house. His expression was hard to make out, but she watched him wrestle the hose into a terracotta pot. The hose must have weighed more than he did. Poor man. When she thought he might come up to the front door, Mimi took off her mules and went through the house, up the floating staircase to the guest bedroom where she hid between the bed and the wall. Would he knock? She waited. She waited for a long time, which was perhaps what he did, the gardener in his garden colors. He stood outside the door in good faith of payment. But for what? Hosing down the house against fires, mounting staghorn ferns. What had he done today, the gardener, and why was it she only knew him as shadowy and poor? His stunted children rest their chins on the kitchen table. Sticky strips of flypaper hang near the sink and back door. His wife's scorched hair is in the rice and on his tongue. Now the rice tastes dirty. Look elsewhere. Forget the shapeless face of his fat son. There is his favorite. There, his daughter. Over there near the fly strips, shaking cinnamon on everything she eats. Even eggs, he asks her. The gardener. Where was he now? The gardener's truck was gone. The gardener was gone, left without being paid. Now, how will he feed those children? Driving east into the sensation of the rising sun, driving into mountains made no more attractive than dung by that same sun. Not seeing, not seeing. Stetson was driving without any music, and Jesus, it hurt to look at it. Thank you.
That's just beautiful music. Thank you, Christine. This is going to be a very different sort of music. This is Brandon Hobson's story, Mildred Thorne. Brandon is not here, as I mentioned. He's the author of The Levitationist. His writing has appeared in past issues of Noon, as well as Web Conjunctions, The Believer, Puerto del Sol, New York Tyrant, Gigantic, and elsewhere. Mildred Thorne was surely much too old for such things. He recognized in her a desire to be blindfolded, or so he thought, strange as it sounded. He helped his mother take care of her on Tuesdays and Wednesdays when his mother wasn't working at the halfway house outside of town. Mildred Thorne was not so old she couldn't communicate with him or walk to the bathroom on her own. She was forgetful of medication and needed someone to help her with laundry and meals mostly. Poor old woman. She needed help. He didn't think of her as elderly. The more he was around her, the more he discovered Mildred Thorne aroused something in him he couldn't define or understand, not at all. Not under the odd circumstances of helping her into the tub. For instance, any time she needed to wash her hair in the tub, he would volunteer to do it, which pleased his mother a great deal. "That's nice of you," his mother said. "Please do." He understood the physical act of washing Mildred Thorne's hair, helping her lean forward to the spout, and pouring a long drip of shampoo into his hand and massaging it around in her hair. He liked doing this. He imagined she was sucking his cock while he massaged her head, and thought, this is what it would be like, massaging her head while she sucked my cock. Keep your eyes closed, he told her while he massaged her scalp. Keep them closed now. Hear? He enjoyed thinking about Mildred Thorne in such a sexual way. Part of it was the way she leaned forward in the tub, or maybe it was her frail body and loose skin. But more than that, it was the actual act of massaging her head with shampoo and pretending she was sucking his cock. He wondered what it would be like to fuck Mildred Thorne. She wasn't so old she couldn't spread her legs and fuck. She was surely capable of experiencing pleasure. To blindfold her made the thought even more exciting. She wouldn't be embarrassed. After all, he had helped her into the tub and washed her hair. It would be sort of a game. One night, in a bar on 3rd and McKinley, he drank whiskey and tried talking to a woman about it. This is a secret desire of mine, he told the woman, to blindfold and fuck someone. Or maybe to be blindfolded and fucked too. Maybe it's the secret desire of most men, eh? Do you think men need to be the ones doing the blindfolding, or should they be blindfolded? What about the fucking? What is it about the blindfold? Could Mildred Thorne want to be fucked? You're drunk, the woman said. Who's Mildred Thorne? Mildred Thorne, he said. An older woman my mother takes care of, he said. A woman who lives alone in an apartment with 7 cats. A woman too old to remember things, but not so old she's bedridden or an invalid. Mildred Thorne, who walks hunched over. Mildred Thorne of white hair and loose skin. Well, I think that's just sick, the woman at the bar said. He looked into his glass of beer and tried to think of something nice to tell her. Goddamn creep, the woman said. The next Tuesday, he asked his mother in front of Mildred Thorne if a woman likes to be blindfolded and fucked. At what age does it stop? Quit talking trash, his mother said. But as he said this, he could see in Mildred Thorne's face something form. Maybe it was an expression of desire. Blindfolded, she wouldn't have to look at him or see his face or body. He could do whatever he wanted and tell her to think of someone else. It would be better than she imagined. It would be sort of a game. Later, while his mother sat smoking at the kitchen table, Mildred Thorne had a violent coughing fit and brought her hand to her mouth. Her eyes watered, and she looked at something on the floor. Wipe that phlegm off her hand, his mother told him. He took a tissue from the table and wiped the phlegm from her hand. Wipe her chin, his mother told him. Wipe that phlegm from her chin. He wiped her chin. On the street outside, a garbage truck, making noise, drove away. That must be garbage, Mildred Thorne said.